Good afternoon. This is the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee. We are here for the public hearing portion of House Bill 954. We've had two previous hearings. One was I guess what you call a presenting hearing, where the author presented the bill and responded to 2 rounds of questions from the members. We then had another hearing where medical professionals from both sides of the issue came and testified and also subjected themselves to questioning. This on any issue or any bill that gets a large amount of attention, we always make sure that we set aside time for what we call a public hearing for the public at large to come and to share their thoughts, whatever those may be. Those can be just individual people. They can be organizations representing associations of people. It could be just anything. So what we will do, as is our tradition, is we will go ahead and we have a hard stop around, I say a hard stop, but 2:30 is our goal, maybe 2:40 at the latest. And what we'll do is we'll call on individuals that have signed up here on the sign-up sheet. We'll go ahead and do our best to get through the entire list. I think I'm going to err on the side of calling representatives of organizations first, since those organizations represent large groups of people, both for and against. And then we'll call in individuals and do our very best to get through the entire list, and of course to apportion time equally. So give me just a second to do a little quick math. And what I'm probably going to do, just based on the number of folks that have signed up, is I'm going to ask you to try to confine to please confine your remarks to 5 minutes or less. You don't. 5 minutes is a longer time than you may realize. If you could just do it for a few minutes, because members may have individual questions that they may want to ask, and then again they may not. So we're just trying to leave enough wiggle room time-wise to allow for that. I know Mr. Walraven, representing the perinatologist, if I'm saying that right. I know you had asked to be recognized, so let me just go ahead and recognize you to present your comments to the committee, and then we'll march on from there. Either one is fine, just as long as you speak into one of them. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for letting me be here today.
Is that coming? Hold on one second. Is that coming? Press the button on it. Now go.
Is that better?
No. Is the green button on?
How about this? That works.
Now try that. The one on your right.
Testing, testing.
Is the green light on back already? It's it's on.
Testing, 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 testing.
Hold on one second. Now try it.
Testing. Is that better?
Try again.
Testing. Hey!
Umpteen years of formal education.
Yeah, I think we'll use this one. I appreciate the opportunity to come in here, and I will be as brief as the chairman asked. I represent the Infertility and Perinatology Consortium of Georgia. They distinguish themselves from other obstetricians in the fact that they receive 3 more years of training in maternal fetal medicine. Essentially, what they do every day is examine patients anywhere from week 18 beginning, unless there is a complication that sends a patient to them earlier, through probably weeks 24 to 26. They get their patients upon referral, and they come referred from one of 2 sources, generally from a general practitioner in an area where a patient does not have access to an obstetrician. And if they do have an access to an obstetrician, they get referred to by that obstetrician when they sense the fact that there either may be some sort of problem with the unborn child, or at 20 weeks when the standard of care applies for them to receive the one sonogram that most health plans and Medicaid would allow them to receive. Basically, they find either a healthy fetus with 2 kidneys, working lungs, a heart with no holes in it, lungs that are working, a bladder that functions, And generally it's at this time that you find out what the gender of your child is. A lot of folks think today's the day where I get to go find out if we're having a boy or a girl. And, you know, when I got to do that, we took our parents, and that's about all we were concerned about. So we found out we were having a little boy. And the rest of the time we were thinking about little boy and how fun that was going to be, instead of all the other information that the doc was showing us. Wow, there's a working liver. There's 2 good, healthy kidneys. There's a good, strong heart. And he rolled over, and I saw these big, strong back muscles, and I'm like, he got those from his mom's side of the family. And we walked out of there knowing that we had a happy, healthy baby inside coming. 3 weeks later, wife and I were getting ready to go to a local restaurant. They have these free poker games that I enjoy playing, and she was going to indulge me and allow me to go. She steps up to me on the way out the door, and she goes, "John, I'm bleeding." And I was, first of all, kind of thought this might be a little cute way to get me out of playing cards, but no, she was serious, and we went to the hospital. And our obstetrician came and visited us at about 10:30 at night. And he couldn't tell us why she was bleeding, but he did say that in the next morning we would see a perinatologist. And in the basement of Northside Hospital, there's 6 perinatologists. In and south of Macon, Georgia, there are 6 perinatologists. Everyone doesn't have the access to this type of care. We are here to talk about fetal pain, and it has been, you've heard testimony about fetal pain from different sources and from different perspectives. The first testimony you heard was not from a doctor. He was an osteopath. He was not an obstetrician. He was an anesthesiologist. No training in obstetrics whatsoever. And he cited an 18-year-old study, which in medical research terms is pretty old. And what that study set out to do was to figure out whether or not a fetus would need anesthesia if they were going to have an invasive surgery. The perinatologist that testified before you last week, or early this week, pardon me, testified that they used general anesthesia on the pregnant woman in order to do something like stick a shunt in the side of the fetus's body. The purpose of that is to drain the bladder whenever there's a problem, so that it won't back up, make the kidneys fail, and potentially invade the lungs. So if they can stick a shunt into the side of the fetus's body cavity with only administering general anesthesia to the mother, their posture is they do not, as the findings say, routinely inject a fetus. She says she's never injected the fetus. They can't find a Georgia doctor. They can't find a doctor to come in here and tell you that they do it. But that's what the findings say in the bill. And that's what this group is here to talk about, is try to get some facts about what really happens in the exam room and in the operating room when it comes to fetal pain. The study that was cited by the osteopath before you was 18 years old, like I said earlier. But what it did was they took a needle, and they stuck that needle in the chest of that 22-week-old fetus 15 times per minute for 10 minutes. After that 150 jabs of the needle into the chest of the fetus, they did not increase any concentrations of cortisol or B-endorphin. I'm not a doc, so I can't pronounce that right. But in essence, 150 needle sticks to the chest of a 22-week-old fetus did not produce the response that would indicate a response to pain. It was a response to stimuli, but they could not say that it was a response to pain. And they concluded in that study that the fetus mounts a hormonal stress response to invasive procedures. They raised the possibility that the fetus feels pain in utero and may benefit from anesthesia for invasive procedures.
Let me ask, Miss, we're right
Am I hitting time?
on your 5, but I'll let you wrap up.
Okay,
certainly.
thank you.
Sure.
3 other studies have been brought to you on this matter from the Journal of American Medical Association, dated 2005. another one from the Royal College of Obstetrics at Oxford University dated 2010. They say that the fibers that are required for fetal awareness of noxious stimuli, that means feeling pain, cannot exist before 29 to 30 weeks. The connections that are required for the fetal pain do not begin to meet up until 24 weeks. So I'm going to close by saying that perinatologists do not do anything except examine pregnant women with the goal of helping a family have a healthy baby. They diagnose, they present the diagnosis to the patient, they send the patient back to their general practitioner or to their obstetrician, and they make a decision of what to do there.
We call Mr. Setzler, who has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Walraven, thank you for coming. I wanted to ask you to kind of draw for us your conclusion. I do have a follow-up question, if it pleases the chair. So what's your conclusion with respect to the fetal pain arguments that you're making? What conclusion should we draw from that as a committee?
The conclusion would be found in the bill at line 22, being that we are putting the United States of America on notice that Georgia has a compelling state interest in protecting fetuses from pain. So if your facts don't underlie your compelling state interest, it's going to be very difficult to convince a judge, let alone 3 judges, or hopefully one day 9 judges, that Georgia has a compelling state interest in preserving something that we can't prove exists.
I understand, and that really goes to the thrust of the question, because I had some dental work done recently, and I actually have a dental implant that's going to go in.
Sorry.
Well, you know, I tell people dental implants are sometimes the best procedures because you don't. It's just that once it's done, it's done. They normally do a very good job. They put you under some pretty significant anesthetic to drill into your jawbone and anchor a bolt. Likewise, would you agree that if I were with the marvels of modern medicine, that they could give me various kinds of anesthetics, such that if I had to have an arm amputated, they could amputate my arm and I would not feel it? Isn't that the case under modern medicine?
I would believe so, because you have those connections in your brain to your cortex that we're discussing that the fetus lacks at this point.
Okay. So if with modern anesthetics, if they can anesthetize me and take off this arm and take off that arm, and take off my legs and pull me apart piece by piece, I might not feel any pain. But would you argue that it's okay for someone to come in, anesthetize me, and pull me apart piece by piece?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
You have a constitutional right that, unfortunately, the United States has not bestowed upon a fetus at 20 weeks.
Okay, before we get to the Constitution, and we'll get there in a moment, but before we get to the Constitution, you agree with me that no one has a right to pull me apart limb from limb, even if they can eliminate the pain. You would agree with that?
I would think it's the wrong thing to do under the standard of care for the medical procedure that you're presenting me in front of me right now.
I would also agree with that, but it's fundamentally wrong. It's immoral at every level within our understanding of the law for someone to pull me apart and kill me, even if they can anesthetize me and make me not feel it. And I think everyone in this room would agree with that. And to the point, just because the fetus can't feel them, I would submit a fetus can feel themselves being pulled apart. But even if they couldn't, even if I were to grant you the fact at some various 20, 22, 24 weeks of gestation, and we can debate that, the fact of that a living, distinct, and whole human person is being pulled apart piece from piece, the pain of it, frankly, is secondary. And I don't want us to go to take our eyes off the ball. I know that's part of this bill. But the central question is should a person in utero be able to be pulled apart at the convenience of a parent? And I would submit to you the real thrust of this is just because someone can make my pain go away doesn't mean they can do anything they want to me. Likewise, just because we can either make a fetus not feel pain or perhaps they feel varying degrees of pain doesn't address the fundamental act of bringing about their demise intentionally in a frankly fairly graphic way. And that, I think, Mr. Chairman, is what's before the committee.
Mr. Walwater, I'll let you respond, and then I'm going to have to excuse you for the next witness.
May I have one little closing statement after I respond?
Maybe you can work it in.
I can work it in.
All right.
You and I agree on a personal level of what you just spoke about, but that's not what we are asserting to the United States. We're asserting that we have an interest in fetal pain that trumps anything the United States tells Georgia. And if we get our eye off the ball, like the words you just used, then we will have erred in drafting, and the judge will say we will have erred in our assertion, and our effort will fail. And one thing I want to close with, Mr. Chairman, is that only 949 out of 32,925 abortions occur after week 21, and this is from Georgia Right to Life. I would assert, and the perinatologist would assert, that eliminating elective abortions in this state is a goal of theirs and should be a goal of the General Assembly's, and we would like to continue working with you to increase, to strengthen the law in a way where we can reduce the number of elective abortions while preserving the right for a medically futile abortion, one with no heartbeat, one with no brain, one that is not compatible with life, from being caught up by a limit that we cannot base in scientific fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to be here. Let me call on Professor Tanya Washington. And Professor Washington, again, if you could just limit your comments to a few minutes in case there is a question or two, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to be here, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here to speak specifically to the constitutionality of the proposed legislation. The law is very clear in terms of pre-viability, a woman having a right to terminate her pregnancy, and the state not being able to interfere with that right. Post-viability, the state can assert a constitutionally protected right on behalf of the fetus, and that authority is limited, however, to regulations that provide for the health and life of the mother. So there needs to be that health exception included in any legislation that is going to limit the woman's right in that regard. This legislation is challenged because it would establish a 20-week gestational period as the bright line for when a woman is prohibited from exercising her constitutionally protected right to terminate her pregnancy. And the health exception is not sufficient. It only speaks to severe life-threatening circumstances. It does not consider a whole host of other considerations that are relevant to a woman's health that the Supreme Court has recognized as relevant. I also would like to say, in my capacity as a civil procedure professor who gives my students instruction about how to litigate cases, that this is not a good test case. It's going to be expensive to even get it to the point where it is in front of the Supreme Court if they do indeed decide to grant cert, which they only do in 2% of the cases that are presented on appeal. So we're going to spend a great deal of energy and time and taxpayers' money dealing with challenges to a piece of legislation that is not likely to change the well-entrenched constitutional law as it pertains to abortions.
Let's see. Mr. Ramsey, was that you?
I appreciate you being here. We all have an opinion as to the state of the law. There's thousands of lawyers that have looked at Roe and Casey and Gonzalez and how it's going to flesh out if interpreted in any number of state laws that have been promulgated over the last 20 or 30 years, and I think there's a lot of lawyers sitting on this committee that have pretty strong opinions, non-lawyers as well, about the constitutionality of what we're trying to do here. So I think it's helpful when we have a witness offering a legal opinion. I'm just curious, what's your personal opinion? Should the state be placing limits on abortion?
Well, I don't think I'm here to talk about my personal opinion. It's an interesting question, and I appreciate it. But my response to that would be the same response that I give to my students when they ask me what my personal opinion is when I'm teaching them the constitutional framework that dictates decisions in this particular area of the law. The law is clear. We're not talking about law that has recently been decided. There's clear precedent, and the Supreme Court has been fairly consistent in establishing a pretty clear framework for determining what the state's interests are, what the woman's interests are, and how they should be balanced given the period of time that we're dealing with in terms of the duration of the pregnancy.
I once had a law professor of mine down at Georgia State say, if you ever see the word clear in a brief, it's exactly the opposite of that. Your comments just made me think of that. I just think I think it's important to know where people are coming from. I'm an attorney. You're an attorney. Certainly, our personal ideologies are going to color how we reach a conclusion as to the law. I appreciate you're not willing to offer your personal opinion. You're here to give a legal conclusion, but I think the members of the committee also understand that our personal ideology drive us to arrive at various conclusions as to the law that is very, very unclear. So I appreciate your testimony. Appreciate you being here, ma'am.
Thank you.
Professor, thank you for being here. What law school do you teach at?
Georgia State.
Outstanding. The best law school in the state.
Absolutely. But let me just offer a follow-up response. What I will share with you that is going to be as revealing as anything else I'm willing to say is that I respect that the state has an interest. I respect that the woman has an interest. I also respect that where the Supreme Court has consistently drawn the line as to how those interests should be balanced is appropriate and well entrenched and would render proposed legislation like the one at issue here unconstitutional.
So
Mr. Ramsey, we're going to have to move on. I'm sorry. And to members, I realize that there will be questions, but in order for us to go ahead and get through the witness list and for folks to have their say, I'm going to have to not call on you for questions. But I'm going to try to go. What's that? AccuWeather forecaster Nikki Randall has just informed me that there may be some weather rolling in as well. So just thank you so much, FYI on that. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me call on Reverend Patricia Templeton. Reverend, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I'll ask you, please, as well, to confine yourself to a few minutes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Committee members and Mr. Chairman, I thank you for allowing me to testify today against House Bill number 954. I'm Patricia Templeton. I'm an Episcopal priest in the Diocese of Atlanta. I've been ordained for 18 years and currently serve as the pastor of St. Dunstan's Episcopal Church in North Atlanta. I'm advocating today for respect for all points of view and differences in religious beliefs concerning abortion. No single religious voice can speak for all faith traditions on this complex issue. But I believe that our faith has a lot to say about social justice issues, including issues of health and reproductive rights. Like many faith leaders, I'm concerned about and seek solutions to pressing problems such as inadequate health care and insurance coverage, unintended pregnancies, the spread of HIV/AIDS, and the severe reduction in availability of reproductive health care services. So often it seems we stagnate in the bitter abortion debate rather than working on basic issues such as access to sex education, family planning, affordable child care and health care, and access to adoption services. These are all necessary ingredients for healthy families and for communities to nurture children with love and hope. So is protecting a woman's right to choose from an array of options in difficult situations. As a minister, I'm often the first person a woman speaks to when she's facing a life crisis, including complex, personal, intimate reproduction issues. Many faithful people, when facing health issues, turn to their ministers or religious leaders for counsel and support. I've met with many women and families who were grappling with these issues. The decision of whether or not to continue a pregnancy can be very complicated. I've met and counseled and prayed with women who have decided to continue pregnancies in less than ideal circumstances, even when it was clear that the fetus they carried would either be stillborn or would not survive after birth. I've met and counseled and prayed with women who have tearfully decided to terminate a pregnancy, even when that pregnancy had been an occasion for joy. I have never met with anyone who has made these decisions easily or casually or without much soul-searching and prayer. The point is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to these complicated situations. What is right for one woman or family may not be right for another. In many situations, any choice has the potential for pain and loss. There is no clear-cut good choice, only the best choice in a bad situation. The women and families I've met with over the years have trusted me as their priest to help them sort out the factors involved in their decision and to guide and support them in acting faithfully. I've learned to trust women and their families to prayerfully make their own best decisions after that. For many clergy members, and certainly for me, a central religious belief is that women are moral agents with the capacity and responsibility to make the decision of whether or not to choose an abortion. My faith teaches me that it's always disrespectful, even discriminatory, to assume or imply that women cannot make these personal, private medical decisions. In fact, the very basis of an individual's dignity is the ability to be a moral decision maker, including decisions women make about reproduction. For these reasons, I urge you to oppose House Bill 954. Let's work together for solutions and preventions, not punishments.
Thank you, Reverend Templeton. We appreciate your time. I'll call on Shelley Little.
Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it. I hope everybody can hear me. My name is Shelley Little. I am a 30-year-old female. I have a son. I'm a full-time student, and I'm also a systemic lupus patient. I don't know if y'all are familiar with lupus at all, but basically it is an autoimmune disorder. My body is incapable of detecting what is a foreign invader versus what is healthy tissue or healthy organs. How this comes into play with this bill is that I can very easily be in a remissive state when I get pregnant. Like I said, I have one very healthy 9-year-old son, and luckily throughout the pregnancy I didn't have the complications of lupus. It wasn't until he was born that the lupus attacked my thyroid, making it go hyper and hypo and all kinds of crazy stuff. However, it could very well have easily attacked my kidneys, causing renal failure. It could very well attack my blood. It can attack my skin, whatever else. The problem that I have with this bill is that, oftentimes lupus in pregnancies doesn't present until 24 weeks. At that point, it becomes a health burden on the mother. Say if I were to get pregnant, have a healthy, first trimester, and then my body decides that it's going to reject the fetus or reject my kidneys. This, is a serious situation, and that if I'm on bed rest, I don't have anybody to take care of my 9-year-old son. My health is vital to his stability, as well as I don't think that it is fair or right that my doctor should waste valuable resources and question whether or not my life is in the balance. that is something that I, as an individual, having individual freedoms, should be able to determine. If my body is failing on me because it's literally attacking itself, I should have the right to say that this pregnancy, unfortunately, needs to stop. Being a mother is a very painful situation if you have to say, admit to yourself, well, maybe this pregnancy isn't good for me and I have to terminate it. That's, a horrible situation to be in. However, if I were to die, or if I were to get so sick with my lupus that I can't provide for the one son that I already have, what good am I? That's, please tell me what good am I to my son at that point? Furthermore, this is a decision that I should be able to make with my doctor. It's just a human right, period. So I definitely oppose this bill for people with lupus or any other sort of autoimmune disorders, any other chronic disorders. This is serious. While it may not cause me to die, it could definitely cause very negative, horrible ramifications in my health. Questions, comments?
Yes, we appreciate your being here. It takes more than a little bit of courage to come down here and speak from your heart, and we appreciate you doing that.
Well, it is a serious issue that affects me personally, and it affects tons of women, period. So, and like I said, if I'm not healthy, what good am I to the son that is already here? How do I provide for him if I can't do anything because my body is rejecting itself?
We thank you for your testimony.
All right, thank you.
I'll call on Ann, I think it's Mellinger Birdsong. If I said that right.
That's right.
All right. And Ms. Birdsong, if you would as well, just confine yourself to a few minutes if you could.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's probably about 4 minutes. My name is Ann Mellinger Birdsong. I'm a pediatrician, an epidemiologist, and a parent. I have worked at city, county, state, and federal health agencies and a Native American clinic. But that is not why I'm sharing my story. I'm here to tell the story of our babies in heaven. This is a very personal story that I ordinarily do not share, but because of the ability for women to make private and personal medical decisions might be taken away, I am. I have had 2 pregnancies in which the baby had major genetic anomalies, which my husband and I decided to interrupt. Both occurred when I was married, had a child already, and was trying to get pregnant. To this day, we are still incredibly sad for our losses. I was 42 when I got pregnant with our 4th child. Because I had already had a miscarriage and a baby with genetic anomalies, I went for early screening. The ultrasound showed signs of heart failure already, so the perinatalogist recommended chorionic villus sampling. I cried and cried while waiting for it to be done. After the sample was taken, I talked with the perinatalogist. He was so grim and stone-faced. He didn't have anything to offer or much of anything to say. He most certainly didn't offer any hope at all. I cried some more. Then the results came back a week or 2 later. Trisomy 18, also known as Edwards syndrome. My baby was already in heart failure at 12 weeks of gestation, and combined with the trisomy 18, we knew she was dying. It was just a matter of time. A week, a month, 2 months, no one really knew exactly. They just knew she was dying. My doctor thought, and I agreed, it was safer to take the baby sooner when it was safer for me. Here are the reasons why she and I thought it was safer. Any surgery or induced delivery is less risky and less complicated when the uterus and baby are smaller. The longer a mother is pregnant, the more chances there are of developing complications of pregnancy: hemorrhage, preeclampsia, diabetes, infections such as endometritis or sepsis, and a small but still present risk of death. In addition, there is the additional mental anguish of continuing a pregnancy in which you know the baby is dying. This is not something to be taken lightly. To me, deciding to end a pregnancy when the baby is dying is similar to taking someone off life support when it is clear further medical care would be futile. It doesn't make sense that parents are able to make this decision about a baby who is on life support after being born, but wouldn't be able to make the same decision when the baby is inside the womb. Imagine if the doctor had not been allowed to take the baby. Because dying babies do not kick strongly, a mother can't rely on feeling her baby kick to know if she is still alive. Imagine going to the OB's office week after week to see if your baby still had a heartbeat. Think what it would be like to sit in the waiting room with other pregnant women who were making plans for the birth of their babies while you were waiting to see if yours had died. Imagine how much anguish you would feel each time you saw an obviously pregnant woman, knowing that your baby was going to die. I had a very rough time for several years whenever I saw someone at the grocery store or park who was pregnant. Imagine what it was like for me. Imagine if it happened in your family. Imagine if there was an infection in the baby in uterus and the infection got into my bloodstream, which is called sepsis. If I had gone into septic shock, they would have had to rush me to the ER and put me on a ventilator in the ICU, perhaps because we missed knowing if the baby had died. Again, although this is rare, it can happen and the risk is not zero. It could have happened to me. Imagine if it happened in your family. I can tell you, normal labor pains are a summer breeze compared to having to say goodbye to your baby too early because he or she is dying. That is like a hurricane. It blows away or turns upside down everything in your life. It is the hardest thing I have ever done. As hard as it was, I can't imagine that this decision might be taken away. I can't keep silent knowing that other women and families might suffer greatly. I found out about my baby's problems before 20 weeks, but sometimes people do not find out until after 20 weeks. Even though there is early screening, things do not always go the way they should, and chromosomal problems are not always found early. In addition, there are other lethal birth defects that are not chromosomal and are not found out until the first ultrasound, which is usually performed at 20 weeks. It has to be around 20 weeks in order to allow the organs to be big enough to be seen well on the ultrasound. Some of these defects include Potter syndrome, which is no bladder or no kidney, which causes poor lung growth and babies who suffocate because they can't breathe, lissencephaly and other brain malformations, and thanatophoric and other skeletal dysplasias, among others. These birth defects are lethal and cannot be corrected by surgery. Babies with these lethal defects suffer great pain after they are born until they die, with conditions for which there is no medical treatment. For them, this bill would cause more pain, not less. Often, when an initial ultrasound detects a problem, a mother is referred to a specialist for a more detailed ultrasound or more testing. Sometimes it isn't clear that the problem will be fatal, and a person has repeated ultrasounds over a period of several weeks or months until something definitive can be determined. Referrals, repeated ultrasounds, and additional testing lead to a later gestational age when it becomes clear that the baby is dying and nothing can be done. But I ask you, does it really make a difference if someone is 21 weeks instead of 19 weeks when she finds out her baby is dying? Should not this medical decision rest with the woman, her family, her clergy, and her doctors? This bill would take away the ability of Georgia women and their families to make this private medical decision in consultation with their doctor and clergy. Instead, the government would be dictating a family's decision. And think how truly awful it would be if the first ultrasound appeared to have a problem and a family decided to terminate without more detailed testing because of the 20-week limit, and then they found out that the baby would have been healthy. I ask you to please give families time to do more detailed testing and to be really sure of their baby's diagnosis before they make a decision. There are hundreds of women in Georgia like me who have received the devastating news that their baby is sick and dying. I ask you to listen to our stories and hear our voices. Thank you.
Ms. Birdsong, thank you for coming and sharing your story. Let me call on Suzanne Ward. And again, Ms. Ward, the same admonition for everybody, if you could just keep it for a few minutes.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for having me. I'm pleased to be able to speak from my heart this afternoon. My name again is Suzanne Ward, and I have been, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you, an ultrasound specialist for almost 30 years. It's been my privilege to watch babies from all ages for that amount of time. In my business, I've often found out that our girls that I speak with on a day-to-day basis get more education on getting their ears pierced or a tattoo than they do about the process of abortion and what will happen to them and what will happen certainly to their baby. It has profound long-term, a profound long-term impact from physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I wanted to pass around some ultrasounds of these babies that we are talking about at about the 20 minutes. We cannot ask what the unborn feel. Would you agree with that? We'll get no response. Pain is difficult to assess at times. From an ultrasound standpoint, I can make lots of observations as I look at these babes. As early as 10 weeks, a specialized ultrasound will be done called a nucholucency screening. Nucholucency screening is profoundly related to Down syndrome. In order to get the proper measurement that I need this baby in the right position. They don't often cooperate, and that I can't affect either. But I often will poke at the mother's belly repeatedly until I get the baby in the right position. I don't know. Is it stimuli? Is it moving away from a source of pain? Don't know. But it reacts to the pressure. Very often, we'll see the baby at 13 weeks or older sucking their thumb. Sucking their thumb, what babies do well in utero. It's a powerful thing to see, and I watched recently my niece's baby do that at just that 13-week mark. The jaw will move the thumb in place, and it's a powerful thing to see. Pain versus pleasure. I imagine a baby gets a great deal of pleasure from sucking, so I would again make that relationship to pain, that they would likely feel pain as well. I will pass this. This is a 20-week fetal model, sized and weighted for the average 20-week baby. Amniocentesis is often done at approximately this time, maybe 16 to 20 weeks. Amniocentesis, for those of you that don't know, is a procedure that carries a small amount of risk for miscarriage, where a needle is punched through the mother's abdomen and into the uterus. At this time, they'll draw cells, fluid actually, from around the baby to do some further testing for genetic problems, for gender, and on. Amniocentesis is typically done under ultrasound guidance. I've watched that needle pass through the mother's uterus time after time. And that baby doesn't hang around for that needle. He doesn't hang around. And if he's poked, and often they will poke an extremity, that baby will recoil. That baby will recoil and get out of the way and allow them to get that fluid. This same type of movement is described often by abortionists as they perform abortion under ultrasound guidance. So I want to leave you with this thought. We cannot assess, we cannot ask the unborn whether they feel pain. We can't, but we can observe. And in my time at the behind the ultrasound machine and with these women, they do feel pain. They recoil as you and I would. They respond to pressure. And that's my assessment.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you again. We call Mary Boyert with the Catholic Archdiocese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the time to talk, and I really appreciate the time you have given to these hearings over the past couple of weeks, that you have really allowed lots of time for consideration and to have the facts discussed and give ample time. My name is Mary Boyert. I am the Respect Life Director for the Archdiocese of Atlanta. And the reason for the concern of the Catholic Church is, first, given the scientific fact that a human life begins at conception, this is not debatable, this is a scientific fact, the only moral norm that is needed to understand the Church's opposition to abortion is the fact that each and every human life has inherent dignity and thus must be treated with the respect due to a human person. This is actually the basis for the Church's teaching on all social issues, not just abortion, but all social issues. And so to claim that some live human beings do not deserve respect or should not be protected by law based on such changeable factors as age, condition, location, or lack of mental or physical abilities is to actually deny the idea of inherent human rights. Such a claim undermines respect for the lives of many vulnerable people, both before and after birth. So this is the Church's position on abortion and other social issues. I will confine my remarks, though, to the subject of this bill today, which is limiting of abortions after 20 weeks. We do support this bill, as it would immediately save lives, approximately 1,400 a year based on the information that we have gotten from the state of Georgia. And it would immediately save lives and bring us closer to our eventual goal. We see this bill as sort of coming to some sort of a common ground, somewhere between the opinions of those who support unlimited access to abortion and those who believe that all unborn children should be protected by law. It's sort of coming in the middle, gives us a time to talk. We also believe that the legislature, yourselves, acting on behalf of the citizens of Georgia, actually have a duty and responsibility to assert the state's compelling interest in the life of a child at 20 weeks. And here I'm just going to quote you from one of my personal heroes, Blessed John Paul II, speaking of the responsibility of legislatures. But responsibility likewise falls on the legislators who have promoted and approved abortion laws. In this sense, abortion goes beyond the responsibility of individuals and beyond the harm done to them and takes on a distinctly social dimension. It is the most serious wound inflicted on society and its culture by the very people who ought to be society's promoters and defenders. In the discussions that we've had about this bill, the question has been raised, because it is part of the bill, about the capability of the unborn child to feel pain. I have brought folders, which I'll leave with your staff, I guess, and one for every member of the committee.
That'd be fine.
Showing documentation that we have found that talks about the physical, anatomical structures that are present in the unborn child at least by 20 weeks, if not earlier. And I should point out that the law, or note that the law talks about the capability of the child to feel pain. We're not here today to come down and say yes or no, but the child has everything he or she needs to feel pain. And so we definitely support the bill based on that. We would support it even if that section wasn't in it. But so it's very important that we realize that at this point we're not talking in any way, shape, or form about an abortion for anything other than a very, very, very serious matter. And the Church does understand that and realize that in these cases it's very, very sensitive. And we have noticed that there is help available to families that are facing an adverse diagnosis, and we strongly support that type of help. We believe that families that have those kinds of dilemmas need us to offer things such as support groups, perinatal hospice, where the family can actually begin to face the same kinds of things that all of us have faced when we had a loved one that is dying, to know the fact that this child that is being carried in the womb will eventually die, either maybe before birth or after birth. I recently went to a seminar where there's a group called Be Not Afraid, and they reach out to families facing this, and they celebrate the pregnancy. They take pictures of the mom as she's pregnant, because this is the only pictures they're going to have of that baby. Maybe they won't even have a picture if the baby dies before birth. So we support those kinds of efforts to help families rather than offer them just death for their child, so that when the child does die, and sometimes they live a little while, they will always have sadness. It will always be sad, but at least they won't have any regrets. And so for those reasons, we support this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Board. I see no questions.
Okay.
And we'll take, staff will go ahead and take those folders.
I have lots more information if you want it, but that's probably enough.
Thank you for taking the time. I'm going to call on Teresa, is it Walschlager? Hope I said that right. Oh, good. That's a first.
Hopefully my partner will behave herself.
I see you have a helper.
Thank you. I'm a little bit nervous. So.
Please don't be. Please don't be. We're just here to listen, and we appreciate your taking the time to be here.
Thank you. I'm here today. I'm a mother of 8, 4 biological children and
Wow.
4 adopted internationally. And
Fantastic.
I'm here because I support this bill for a number of reasons, and I also want to mention that it really touched my heart for both of the mothers that came up and spoke and gave their personal testimony. Very personally for me, one is I actually am a heart patient. I had open heart surgery at Emory in 1991. I have an artificial heart valve, and I have to be on blood thinners to survive, to make sure that I don't clot or stroke or die from that. And I also have a cardiac defibrillator because I have malignant arrhythmias. And so I had my first 2 girls when I was 21 and 23 before my open heart surgery, and I was born to be a mom. And so I have a son that's 17, and I had my son in 1994 after my open heart surgery, and actually had been asked not to have any more children after my open heart surgery because of the risks involved. And
If she has anything to add, it's fine.
okay. And but personally, my personal faith with the Lord convicted me that, not in a condemning way, but convicted my heart that everything would be okay. That, yes, I did have fears and anxieties about, what was really going to happen. I guess, specifically my husband was like, okay, am I going to be a widow here, if we have this baby? And he didn't suggest terminating the pregnancy, or neither one of us wanted to do that, but we were terrified. We really were.
Sure.
And so anyways, I had my baby. He is a strapping 17-year-old today, plays varsity baseball and is healthy, and I got through the pregnancy. And really, I guess I just want to share with other women that yes, it's important in making these decisions to go to your pastors, to consult with your doctors, but ultimately it's between us and our Creator, and have faith. And I'm not here to say, I have courage and you didn't. That's not it at all. I mean, I could have maybe I would have, if I would have been in a different position in life, I would have. But I was actually a single parent when I had my 17-year-old son. So I wasn't in a, ideal situation either. I was 32 years old. I chose to have him. And under a very difficult medical situation. I actually developed a blood clot when I was 11 weeks pregnant with him, and had an embolectomy under sedation, which is where they remove the blood clot. And we both came out fine, and like I said, he's fine today. And then when I was 41, I became pregnant with my son Nicholas, which was really a desire of my heart to become pregnant again and most of this room might think I'm crazy, but it was a desire in my heart, and God blessed me with my son, Nicholas, and the same thing with that. I actually have to go off my oral blood thinner because it's not safe for the baby. It can cause severe or mild birth defects with the baby. And so I had to give myself injections twice a day of blood thinner that goes, like I said, I give myself injections of that. And I did that for 9 months with my second son, who's now 9. And he's healthy. I actually got through that pregnancy without any problems with blood clots, had lots of arrhythmias, and, it was pretty rough. I spent a lot of time crouched up on the ground in various arrhythmias, and I get shocked from a defibrillator for my arrhythmias. So, it was tough, but I guess my heart is just saying, woman's choice to make these decisions, and we all have these decisions to make, but I just say to moms, I say to women that are pregnant in any situation, whether they're married or single, be strong, be courageous, trust God, and I wouldn't have this little baby sitting here in my lap if her mother had not chosen life for her. She has achondroplasia, which is the most common form of dwarfism. We brought her, Lexi, home from Latvia last February. And I have no condemnation towards her mother for placing her for adoption. She abandoned her at the hospital at birth and she has 3 other average-sized healthy children. I also have another son from Ukraine, and Christopher has cerebral palsy. He has significant developmental delays. He does not speak. He has hearing impairment. And these children are my blessings. They teach us so much. My family, they teach us a lot. We have 5 healthy sons, and they teach them compassion. And I think for all of us, I think what happens in these situations when we're faced with these decisions to make these laws, the spirit of fear is very, very strong amongst us, and fear of crossing the street when it's busy, fear of everything, and I think we just need to look fear in the eyes and tell fear to get away, because it's very debilitating. That's it.
Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it. Call on Karen Labar.
I am not an expert. I am an adoptive mom of 2, and I'm acquainted with infertility issues and later marriage. And also I'm very interested in adoption issues. And in sitting in on the testimony last time and in hearing some of what was said this time, it concerns me that there would be a presumption that the legislature would act upon that less than perfect children are a reason to abort. And you've just seen an example of a mom who's very carefully taken on and willfully taken on the responsibility of apparently 2 children who have pretty profound physical needs and are going to need a lot of love and a lot of care. This is not uncommon. There are agencies. One of them is called Christian Homes and Special Kids, CHASK, C-H-A-S-K. It's an adoption agency where women can make an adoption plan before or after birth for their children when they know that they're going to have special needs. And each birth mother is offered 3 families to choose from according to their literature. So, and they have web pages that are full of families who are waiting to adopt special needs children. I don't think we're told about that a whole lot. Every now and then you see a family who's adopted several, but there are waiting lists for these children, and they are wanted children. And to be aborting them, that's not the only option. There is another option if the parent does not feel capable of taking on the extra taxing responsibilities of that. The 2007 statistics in Georgia say that 38% of children adopted in Georgia are special needs children. Most of these are out of foster care, and these are only the public agencies that we're talking about. But it's many, many children, and this is common across the country. Younger children are even more in demand than many of these who would be older children. The other thing I wanted to mention was also the perinatal hospice concept. They call themselves a gift of time, or hospice in the womb. There are over 120 such programs in the U.S. and other countries. There are 2 in Atlanta, 1 in Gainesville, 1 in Columbus. Their purpose is to help mothers continue pregnancies with babies who will die before or shortly after birth, and to ease them through the emotional, physical, and other difficulties that they will encounter. And their experience has been, quote, not one family regretted carrying to term so that they could meet their child, but many express regret over missing that opportunity, unquote. And they call themselves in perinatal hospice a beautiful practical response to one of the most heartbreaking challenges of prenatal diagnosis. And I think there are those, there are many others, but there are those 2 very positive options for these people who are in difficult situations to choose adoption for their child and for perinatal hospice. And there are obviously physical, emotional, and other repercussions of choosing to end a pregnancy because of the condition of the child that the woman has to deal with for years, as Dr. Birdsong mentioned, the heartache that goes on with that. There is no easy way out of some of these situations, but there are life-affirming, dignity-honoring options that are available. So I urge your due pass on this bill.
Thank you, Ms. LaBar. Calling Charles Jones. I really appreciate people staying within the allotted time. We very much appreciate that in the interest of fairness to all. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman. My name is Charles Jones. This is my first time addressing a legislative committee, so
welcome.
Please be patient. Thank you.
We're usually the ones asking people to be patient with us, so please don't worry.
Oh, great. Well, just by way of introduction, I am an attorney up in Athens. I'm the former president of Athens Area Right to Life, and when I was at UGA Law School, which is in fact the best law school in the state.
I see your time has expired.
No, but when I was at UGA, I was co-president of UGA Pro-Life, and it should come as no surprise from that introduction that I support the bill. And first, of course, I'd like to say how very proud I am of my representative, Honorable Doug McKillop, for bringing this issue to the forefront. My comments today will just be a little bit different, if it's okay. Instead of just reiterating the points that my representative made so well, I would like to use my time to sort of refute an argument that has been raised against the bill by some members of the committee and the public. Is that permissible?
We're here to listen to whatever you have to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, now I've been troubled from some reports of commentary from some members of the committee and the public. So let me just start by saying that I believe abortion is a men's issue as well. I'm going to say that again because I don't think it gets said nearly enough, that abortion is a men's issue as well. There have been some commentaries in newspapers from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about people objecting to men being heard in the discussion, to the fact that the majority of the legislators are male. Well, I'm going to suggest to you, of course, I mean, the reason that abortion is a men's issue as well is because, I mean, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. It takes 2 to make a baby. Every unborn child and every aborted child who's killed is the child of a man as well, of some father. And I have brought. I'm not going to read all this to you, but I would just like to share with you that men mourn the loss of their unborn children. There have been numerous studies. Really, psychologists are only beginning to understand the impact of this on fathers. And from some of the studies that have been done, we see depression among 82%. Some of the words that have been used to describe men who have lost their children to abortion, to describe their feelings, anxiety, helplessness, guilt, responsibility, regret. 72% disagreed that abortion is easy for men and that they have lingering or disturbing thoughts about it. Many report a longing for their unborn baby or thinking about the child that might have been. Just going on, delayed grief reactions, fear, anxiety, tension, depression again, guilt, failure, very, very terrible trauma. Not to be repetitive on that, I suppose the whole thrust of my commentary on this is that men have a dog in this fight too, so to speak. And I think that it is one of the duties, and in fact one of the great privileges of our shared profession, is to speak up on behalf of those who don't have a voice. For example, Theo Purrington, who gives a very powerful testimony about when his baby was killed against his will, against his wishes. In fact, I was just speaking just this week regarding a young man up in Maine whose baby was scheduled to be aborted actually today, Friday, maybe as we speak. And I'm not sure that anybody in this room really comprehends how difficult, how heart-wrenching it is for someone to know that their child is going to be killed or is being killed and that there's nothing that they can do about it. And to be told that they're irrelevant or that they have no right to speak up, no voice at all. And so I strongly urge that, of course I urge you to pass on this, but specifically in the debate, I would encourage everyone to understand the male perspective with respect to abortion, understand that it's a men's issue too. I encourage all of the committee members not to be intimidated into thinking that this is only a woman's issue, because it isn't. Just let us please, these people, the young man in Maine I was referencing and Theo, really did not have any voice in that abortion room. Right or wrong, they just there was nothing that they could do, nothing that they could say. I urge you to let them and us have a voice here in this committee and in our House of Representatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
If there are any questions, I'll be around.
Thank you very much. Call on Dan Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I want to remind the committee of some of the testimony that's been received. The author of this bill, at the conclusion of the last hearing, introduced into the record a stack of testimony from the different court cases, U.S. District Courts, of expert testimony that was given at Congress, the Justice Department, peer-reviewed journals that were referenced, reputations put on the line in a very national sense, that recognized and allegated that pain could be felt as early as 16 weeks. Now, we're not going to agree among the medical community as to when a fetus can feel pain. But I do want to correct some of the statements that have been made and to weigh your expectations as far as a concern for being sued here in the state of Georgia over the constitutionality of this bill. This bill has been passed in 6 states. It has not been challenged except with the exception of Idaho in any of the states by Planned Parenthood, by NARAL, by the National Organization of Women. In fact, you can go online right now and pull up last year's Rachel Maddow MSNBC interview of Ms. Ireland, the head of the National Organization of Women, that clearly states why they cannot challenge this bill, why this bill has not been challenged from a constitutional level. And it's largely because of the recent ruling in Carhart that clearly states, by the majority opinion written by Justice Kennedy himself, talking about the barbaric nature of 20-week abortion, in which, and I'm glad to correct something that Mr. Walraven testified to earlier, saying that the state has no interest, nor does the United States government. It was Justice Kennedy himself who made this comment in the recent Carhart ruling, talking about the dilation and evacuation procedure that is used on 20-week fetuses. He said the fetus in many cases dies just as a human adult or child would. It bleeds to death as it is torn limb from limb. And then he goes on to suggest that the state itself has a very real interest in protecting the rights of the fetus. And it is on that basis that Ms. Ireland has suggested that they cannot challenge this bill, because it would in fact most likely lead to the overturn and reversal of Roe v. Wade. And they're not willing to risk that in any way, form, or fashion. Thanks to Mr. Representative Comer's attentiveness, there's a 2-week delta of difference between this bill, 954, and what is commonly used within the medical community to describe the gestational age of the fetus. We have a difference of 2 weeks. And it is not, once again, to correct Mr. Walraven's testimony, it was not Georgia Right to Life that handed out the number. This is coming from the Health Assessments Unit of the Georgia Division of Health, in which if you subtract those 2 weeks from what they report, we are into the thousands, multiple thousands of late-term abortions in this state by the barbaric act of dilation and evacuation, a digoxin abortion, saline abortion, and partial birth abortion. Those are the procedures used on a 20-week-old fetus at this level of gestational age. I had the privilege in my church, you've heard testimony that we Right to Lifers don't care about the child after it's born, special needs children aside. One of the couples in our church specialized in anacephalic hospice care for children who were not expected to live more than hours after birth, according to medical diagnosis. Of course, the medical community is learning every year and progressing, but these children don't die within hours in many cases. I have held Ruby and Sapphire as they've celebrated their 3rd birthday and their 2nd birthday, respectively. These children and the human dignity that we afford them is something that benefits our culture. A culture can be judged by how it treats the weakest in our midst. And for us, for me personally, as a bearded male involved in supposedly women's reproductive rights, for me it's a human rights issue. And it's one that is carrying us into the 21st century as we draw a bright line in the sand as to when human life begins. I have the privilege of announcing that we will be meeting with Dr. Stephen Stice at the conclusion of this legislative session, University of Georgia stem cell research scientists, to work together on a conjoined agenda of health and human rights. And this is why I speak and rise today in favor of this bill, that it helps us to establish that bright line in the sand where we protect all innocent human life from its earliest biological beginning, because that is what you as legislators, as lawmakers, are going to be asked to do in the 21st century. Tough job ahead of you, but this is only the first step, and one that has not been challenged, as I remind you, in any of the states where it has been passed before. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. We'll call on Mary Ann McNeil.
Hi. Thank you for having me today.
Certainly.
My
Thanks for
name
joining
is
us.
Mary Ann McNeil, and I am the director of PATH, which stands for Post-Abortion Treatment and Healing. This is a nonprofit here in Atlanta. We serve women and some men who are suffering emotionally, mentally, and spiritually following an abortion experience. The women who come to us often come after many years of wrestling with their decision. It's common for us to see women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s who made the decision when they were maybe a teenager or in their early 20s. Some of the symptoms that we most commonly see are depression, anxiety, shame, sadness, increased alcohol or drug use, and difficulty in relationships. Some of these women had late-term abortions. Some that we have worked with chose abortion because through testing they discovered that the baby would not live long once it was born. Others learned that their child had Down syndrome, and a few had the abortion late in pregnancy because the relationship with the father deteriorated. These women suffer in a particular way because this was usually a very wanted child. The mother has had more time to bond. The extended family knows about the pregnancy. She's showing. Her friends know. And hearing that there is a poor prenatal diagnosis brings many marriages to the breaking point as couples try to decide what to do. Hopes and plans for the child have been shattered. Women who end the pregnancy due to a poor prognosis have told me they wished that they allowed nature to take its course and not stepped in to end the pregnancy. At least then they would know that they did everything possible to help their child live, no matter how brief that life was, and that the decision was God's, not theirs. Although this is very, very hard, it does allow the mother to feel at peace. The abortion does not bring peace, but constant what-ifs long after the abortion is over. When a woman receives a poor diagnosis for her baby, she's also very, very vulnerable to the opinion of the medical community that's helping her. The combination of doctors who suggest abortion and fear on the part of her and her partner often has a deadly ending. So PATH is there to pick up the pieces long after everyone else has gone on and the woman is left to grieve alone. There has been very limited research focusing on the mental health risks of late-term abortion. However, I was able to find one study done by Coleman, Coyle, and Rue that analyzed online surveys completed by 374 women who experienced abortion. They found that 52% of those who had abortions in the first and second trimester met DSM criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, but that 67% of the late-term abortion group met this criteria. Later abortions were associated with persistent and unwanted re-experiencing of the traumatic event in the form of distressing memories, flashbacks, hyperreactivity to any stimuli associated with the experience. Also, difficulty falling asleep and disturbing dreams were much more frequent in the late-term abortion group. Although you'll hear testimony on both sides of the argument today, I would like to emphasize that a late-term abortion does not help a woman feel empowered or like she has a choice. Most women at this stage really feel as if they have no choice. I had one woman recently tell me that she felt like she was taking one for the team. Her mother, her boyfriend, and her boyfriend's family all wanted her to have the abortion. And I just thought that was a perfect illustration. That's the way a lot of women feel. It's not a choice where they feel like they have power. They feel like they're cornered. They're in a trap. I would also like you to consider the fact that if abortion does not benefit the child and doesn't benefit the mother, who does benefit from the abortion industry? something to think about. Perhaps we need to follow the money. Although it may appear that abortion is a compassionate thing to do, in my experience, this is a very short-term answer to a very difficult problem. Down the road, sometimes years later, path is left to pick up the pieces. Thank you. I welcome any questions.
Thank you. I see no questions, but thank you for joining us. Elizabeth Arundale. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Elizabeth Arundale. Let me take a breath.
It's all right. You have nothing. Please don't be nervous. We're harmless. We're wearing suits, but we're regular people. I promise you. So just take your time and be comfortable.
I'm going to read this because otherwise I'm...
Whatever makes you comfortable is fine with us.
I am Jedediah's mom. This is John, by the way, but I'm here to talk about Jedediah. 2 years ago, my husband and I conceived Jedediah. When I was 19 weeks along, we learned via ultrasound that our son had many, many markers that indicated he had trisomy 13, a diagnosis that we were told does not support life. We sat there and watched the ultrasound technician click abnormal, box after box after box. During the same hour that our dreams were dashed, we were also counseled to terminate our son's life, since he was going to die anyway. She, the perinatologist, she's very experienced, but she doesn't know the heart of a mother. I mean, she's a mom, but she doesn't know the heart of a mother who has received a poor prenatal diagnosis, because it was her best interest. I mean, she thought it was in my best interest, but I immediately began surrounding myself with my support system, friends, family, and strangers, who were to help me carry this impossible load. I started a blog to keep my friends and family up to date, because speaking about it was too hard. At one point, Jedediah's blog was getting 75,000 visitors a week. People as far as China, India, Russia, Australia, Holland, Lithuania, Brazil, and many other places were logging on weekly to follow our story. I like to think these visitors fell to the contagion of hope, parents who dared to hope, parents who dared to love in the face of death. They sent us many notes of encouragement and offered up many prayers for our intentions. Jedediah defied the odds and was born 8 days after his due date, on November 5th, 2010, at Emory University Hospital right up the road in Midtown. We knew he was a fighter when he survived the first night, and the next night, and the next. The following Monday he was released, and we joyfully took him home. There's some tissue right there. Okay, that was my biggest fear, so now that's okay. Black pants. Okay. This is why I don't wear a suit.
Oh,
what?
Chairman Gold has much more experience with that than you realize.
Indeed I do. Several Navy blazers have been destroyed over the years.
I need a bib. Okay, I don't know where I am now. Okay.
And I have to apologize to you. Had I known you were carrying a bundle there, I would have had you go first. So
oh, no,
I'm sorry I didn't know.
It's okay. You probably would have been spitting up then too. Okay. Okay, so the following Monday he was released, and we joyfully took him home. His siblings loved him deeply. They took turns holding him, and true to siblings, gave him a nickname. They called him Jedi and Jedi Joe. They got a chance to meet their brother, to love him. They also witnessed their father and I unconditionally loving Jedediah despite inconvenience and sorrow. This is the gift Jedediah gave us and continues to give us. For 13 days and 4 hours, we got to hold him and love him. Early November 18th, he passed away peacefully in the same bed he was conceived in, my husband and I holding him and whispering words of love to him. Not many people can say they were surrounded by love from birth to death. At his funeral that Friday, there were so many people. So many who came to hold us up. Looking back to that day in the ultrasound room, I'm still thankful I didn't heed the advice of the perinatologist. Well, at the time, maybe an abortion seemed like an easy way out. I knew instinctively it would have given me a lot more pain than joy. It would have given me a secret pain, one that I wouldn't have been able to gather support for. My family and I pray for mothers in the same situation we faced, mothers who are scared and confused, mothers who want to say yes but feel like they can't, that it's not an option. Once during one of our prayers, Jedediah's big brother, my 8-year-old son, said, if they say no, they would just have the sadness and not have the good times. And that is true. I now believe the easier way out is letting nature take charge. We have a grave to take our tears to. My son has a place of rest, fitting for a Jedi. An abortion would have taken that and much, much more away from me, and would have it would have claimed to be the easier way out. Thank you.
Thank you as well for having the courage to come down and share your story. I know that's not easy.
Thank
you. We are on time, and we have gone through the entire witness list from the sign-up sheet. I want to thank everyone for coming down and sharing their stories on both sides of the issue, and I want to thank everyone for conducting themselves in a professional fashion on a very emotional issue. We will, if and when the committee takes further action on House Bill 954, a notice will be sent in a timely manner, so folks can be aware of the where and the when. And I thank you again, and we're adjourned.